Okay, I'm gonna record that. He and his wife Marcy were raised in the Catskills of New York State. After attending New York University and a 4-year stint in the U.S. Air Force in Colorado Springs, they have lived in the Los Angeles area. Just a few introductory notes. As always, number one, the session is being recorded. Thank you, Hal, for allowing that. We will make it available on JewishGen's YouTube channel later this afternoon. And for everybody who's registered, you will receive a link via email with the link to the video, with the direct link to the video. There will also be a short survey. If you could please submit it, that's always very helpful as we plan for the future. If you would like to ask any questions, we are glad to field them. Please put them in the Q&A, not the chat. We will try our best. Hal will try to get to as many questions as possible towards the end of the program. Please try to keep the questions general in nature. You are welcome to continue to use the chat during the program as a way of connecting with each other and commenting, but please do not post questions in there. We will not be checking that chat. We are going to enable the live caption in just a moment, and that should appear on the bottom of your screens. So welcome again. We're really glad that you're with us. And without any further ado, I pass it over to Hal Bookbinder.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get our slides up. Okay, Rami, can you see the slide?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, I should be sharing. That's one little problem. Get there in a moment. Sometimes I'm technically challenged.
Okay, there you go.
That works? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Welcome to a talk on practicing safe computing. As genealogists, we're attached to the web at all times, and so at risk. And hopefully this will provide you some guidance to reduce the risk that you have in doing your genealogy. I grabbed just a few headlines over the last 2 weeks, and a week doesn't go by where you don't see a major headline about a cyber attack, the TikTok, phishing attacks, or privacy laws being broken. These things are happening on a constant basis, and you not likely or probably already are a victim of one of these problems. So let's go on and talk about them a bit. Currently, some of the most common current scams going around right now are online shopping scams. We all purchase online. So we see a website and it looks awfully like the website that we've always used, but maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe we have actually got into a copy website that's really there to take your information and not send you any products, possibly take your money, at least take your information. So you want to be careful when you go to a website, you're going to the actual website. Social media, we do a lot of our business in social media nowadays. Folks can appear to be one thing in social media and not really be that. So you got to be careful. Folks look to work from home nowadays, and there can be scams that can range all the way from having you provide personal information, because they need before they can give you work with the work from home opportunity, and they've got your information now, all the way to having you pony up some money for materials. Gift card scams. Whenever you are asked to pay for something using a gift card, that should be a red flag. Because gift cards are non-traceable, you will not get your money back, and it's generally probably being cashed somewhere in a third world country where you'll never see it again. Charity scams. At this time of year, we tend to be looking to give, and there's all kinds of charities that pop up, many legitimate, some not legitimate. You got to be careful who you're giving to. Some things look like real charities and they're not. Generally, most anything that appears in the news, that's hot button, becomes a charity somewhere. And payment scams, when you are paying for something, be careful to look, is it really going back to the website of the company? if it's going back to a website that doesn't look quite right, it's probably a problem. So all these things are out there and they're current. And this was just reported by the FBI in the last week or two as the current most prevalent scams to watch for. What about cyber warfare? Well, expect it. Expect there will be cyber warfare. Expect that they will be impacted. Our infrastructure, our utilities are 1,000 different companies all around the country, not well integrated, some with good security, some with poor security. We are at risk, and our enemies have the ability to cyber attack. Russia, we've been putting deep economic pressure on Russia. They could easily use a cyber attack and probably have already to attack us. We've been a number of attacks that have come against us by organizations that are headquartered in Russia. China, they can do it as well. And as we deal with issues with Taiwan and the South China Sea, we might see cyber attacks from them. We're still waiting for Iran to take serious revenge over the killing of Qasem Soleimani. And North Korea, well, North Korea is always a problem. So what can you do about cyber warfare? You're not going to stop it, but you can protect yourself to some degree. One, be prepared for short-term outages. They will occur. You're going to find that possibly your credit cards won't work for the next 3 days. So keep some cash on hand, 1 or 2 weeks worth of cash. Back up your data twice, both locally and remotely. You want it in the cloud, so if you have a disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, or whatever that destroys both your computer and the hard drive you got sitting next to your computer, it's off in the cloud and it's still safe. But what if there's a disruption and you can't get to the cloud? Well, having it in that local device is good. So I recommend having at least 2 backups, one locally and one in the cloud. And finally, passwords. You've been told this 100 times, but it's very, very important. Sometimes we reuse the same password. That's very dangerous. Once someone cracks your password at one website, and now they have your password, they're going to try it elsewhere. And if you're using the same password repeatedly or versions of it, like adding a 1, 2, 3 at the end, that's easily cracked. So you want to make sure you use strong passwords and varied passwords. And there's no way to remember them. So you need to use a facility like a password wallet to manage them for you. But if you take those 4 steps, you'll be in much better shape to deal with the cyber warfare that will be coming. What about overall contingency planning? Look, things happen. And what can happen? Disruptions, disasters, data being lost, corrupted, or inaccessible. Your computer simply failing, partially or completely. And your networks, your connectivity can go down. And all of a sudden you can't reach websites that you need to get to. So what can you do about these things? Well, as I mentioned, backing up your data locally and in the cloud is worth repeating, so I'm repeating it. Consider having backup equipment. I teach, and maybe 6 months ago, I was ready to start my class and my computer wouldn't start. I have a laptop, I pulled it up, got it attached, and taught my class. Having backup equipment can be helpful and being ready to use it. What about the browser you use? If, let's say you use Chrome all the time, that's fine. Chrome is a good facility. I use it myself, but I also have Firefox, Edge, and Tor on my computer. So if for some reason Chrome ceases to function or is a problem, I can switch to a different browser. That's just having backups. What about a driving app? We don't use maps anymore. We use a driving app in our car to get from where we need to go. What if the driving app goes down? Maybe you ought to have a backup driving app you can call up or have a map there. Many of you do use web-based password repositories. I do. And so my passwords are all locked up in the web, and I think pretty safe. But what happens again if the attachment to the web goes down? So I make a copy. Now I keep the copy well hidden, well preserved, but I keep a copy of all my passwords locally, just in case. Contingency planning. A few more thoughts on contingency planning. Most of our smartphones have a hotspot or a hotspot capability where it can actually be an access point to the web going through the phone system. And so if your normal access to the web, your ISP, goes down or is impacted, it's a great backup. Again, I've used that in the past when I've had a problem, but many folks never test or never try out their hotspot and are not ready to use it. I recommend that you try it out. Make sure you're ready to use it if necessary. You've called a friend, you've called a relative, and the phone doesn't work anymore because they got rid of their phone. Or you've used an email and it didn't bounce, but you never got a response. Well, maybe they stopped using that email. I try to have backup emails and phone numbers for people that I deal with and relatives, so that when one fails, I can go back to an alternative. In a disaster, local phones can often be disrupted. They were here in California when we had our earthquakes, and yet long distance continue to work. That can happen. So arrange with a distant relative or distant person, several hundred miles away, to work as a relay just in case. So your relatives can call there, you can call there, they can call you. The long distance, even if the local connections are disrupted. What about just physically getting your family back together again? You may all know to go back to your house, but what if you can't? Have an alternative. And finally, we're all dependent on our cell phones nowadays. I mean, we used to live without them, but now we cannot. I have a backup. I have my primary iPhone and I have a backup Android device, just in case. That's called contingency planning. You all heard of data breaches. In 2021, the 2022 report's not out yet, but in 2021, there were over 4,000 publicly disclosed breaches covering 22 billion records. That's 3 records for every person on the planet of Earth. So your records are probably being exposed and you need to be careful about it. And these were the ones that were publicly disclosed. How often do companies not disclose a breach because they don't look good if they're not protecting your data? So I would say the 4 billion is a low number as far as, or 22 billion records is a low number as far as number of records that got exposed last year. Your records are getting exposed, but there are things you can do about it, not to scare you. So what can you do for data breaches? Well, one, again, complex passwords and different passwords. So if there's a data breach on one facility, it doesn't give them the ability to get to your other facilities. So, you know, they go into Facebook, get your password. Believe me, they will try it on every, on Schwab and all kinds of different banks. And if you're using that same password elsewhere, you're in trouble. You're often offered multi-factor authentication in which they dial your cell phone for confirmation before they let you in. Many organizations require it, some offer it, some do not offer it. I think you should accept it wherever possible. And if they don't offer it, think about maybe that's not the right place to have your credit, your money, your things that are important to you. So multi-factor authentication works and you ought to be using it. You need to be monitoring your credit card bills and financial statements and credit reports on a regular basis, looking for anomalies. Sometimes what people do is, if the number is about right, if they charge around $200 a month and it's $200 or so, they don't look at the details. Hopefully you don't fall for that and you do look at the details, because folks who are taking your credit may well, one, redirect your report so you don't even see it at all. And that ought to be a trigger if you don't get a particular bill that you should normally get. And secondly, they'll often try out with a real tiny charge just to see that it works. And if you see that tiny charge, that can be a trigger to go do something about it. And finally, there's a website called haveibeenpawned.com. And it will, and you can go to that, and it will tell you if your password or your email ID has been found on the dark web for sale. Now, don't get scared. You'll find that it has been, especially your email, because there are various sales sites that have grabbed them, and it's not too much to worry about. And they'll explain there which ones you should be concerned about. And if you're using a password that's simple, January 6, believe me, that's out there already. So that's not going to help you. But if you're using a complex password and you find it, it's time to change your passwords. Multi-factor authentication, again, what it means is it takes more than one thing to get into your system, both a password and a secondary verification. It works, it's worthwhile. I read an article this past year from the FBI indicating that multi-factor authentication might not be as good as we expect it to be, because some Russian state-sponsored actors had exploited companies that were actually using multi-factor authentication. That got my attention, so I read the details. And what I found was these companies, yes, were using multi-factor authentication, but they were not doing it intelligently. They brought on equipment and kept the default settings. Default settings are easily guessed. When I got my router, it came with a default password of the name of the router company. Well, that's easily guessed. They had protocols that just weren't wise. The point that I would bring on that one is that when you buy equipment that comes with some kind of a built-in password, change the password. The original password is often one that can easily be guessed. So multi-factor authentication should be trusted, can be trusted, but doesn't mean that some people haven't been stupid about the way they implemented it. What if there is a data breach? You've been notified of a breach to a website that you particularly use, whether it be a financial website or a social media website. First thing you do is update your password. You got to assume that your password's been taken, and then monitor it. Make sure that all of your reports, your credit report and your charge card reports, are still accurate. And often they will offer free credit monitoring. Accept it. It doesn't hurt. We've heard of all these terms: viruses, worms, Trojans, adware, spyware, ransomware, browser hijackers or bots, and fileless malware. Really quickly, people sometimes wonder what's worse, a virus or a worm. It doesn't matter. They're exactly the same. The only difference is that viruses travel as passengers on emails and from websites you open up. Worms actually travel themselves. They will look around the web for connectivity, and where they see you are exposed, they will launch themselves to you. But once they get there, whether it's a virus or a worm, it could be benign, troublesome, or quite a problem. A Trojan, just like the Trojan horse, looks like one thing, but is really putting viruses on your computer. So you receive a note with a dancing lima bean wishing you a happy birthday to you. It sings it, really cute. And while it's singing it to you, because you invoked it and you gave it authority, it is now installing malware on your computer. So be careful things you open up. Adware and spyware. We all know the pop-ups of adware that drive us crazy. And spyware is where it's actually grabbing information off your computer and shipping it elsewhere, typically to a third world country where you'll never see it again and you can't get the people into jail. So, and adware and spyware actually work exactly the same way. One is just annoying and the other is really a problem. You got to watch for that. Ransomware, you know what ransomware is. Somebody gets on your computer and demands that you pay a fee to unlock it. Typical fees for individuals are about $300 or so. And people will pay that because it's less troublesome than trying to rebuild their computer. For big companies, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And many pay and never tell us. Browser hijack or bots, excuse me, are small programs that get deposited on your computer that essentially make your computer a slave to some other computer elsewhere. Why are these used? Excuse me. These are used to send hundreds of thousands of emails out where you get a flood of emails to people to calm them. And they can't really send them all from one computer because that's going to be seen as a problem when one computer is sending lots of stuff out. So what they'll do is send out instructions to lots of computers who are then used to send the emails out to wherever they want them at the end of the day. These can also be used to attack websites or entire countries. This was used to bring down all the websites in Estonia a few years ago, and it's been used elsewhere. And the latest version is fileless malware. We tend to look for files that are malware themselves, but malware now can come inside non-files. In other words, for example, you all use Word, you all use Excel, and malware can be hidden in the Excel or in the Word program, and that's called fileless malware. Again, all dangerous, all things you need to be concerned about, and all reasons why you need to have anti-spyware, anti-malware software on your computer. We'll talk more of that in a moment. As far as paying lots of money, this occurred last year where Colonial Pipeline ended up paying over $4 million in Bitcoin, untraceable. But the FBI did manage to recover some of the money. But the cyber criminals, well, they were overseas and never were caught. Many companies, when they have a ransom attack, they're not going to announce it. By law, they're supposed to, especially if it's widespread. But do they really want you to lose faith in them? And I will bet there's any number of ransomware attacks which are quietly dealt with. So what about anti-malware software on your computer? If you're using a PC, it automatically comes with malware software called Microsoft Defender, and it's free, and it's good. And when it was first introduced, it really was quite lousy, but it's been improved over the years, and it works quite well now. And in fact, it's what all I use. But you can purchase fee-based products and add that in. If you do, Microsoft Defender recognizes that Norton or McAfee is running, and it shuts itself down. It's still running, sitting there in the background, but it's shut down while McAfee is running or Norton is running. If you deinstall Norton or McAfee, Microsoft Defender will automatically start up again. You cannot turn Microsoft Defender off permanently. All you can do is make it go quiet by installing another product. You may want one of these other products. They have other benefits to them. But if you do install a product like McAfee or Norton or one of the others, you've got to be careful to make sure you pay to renew the subscription. They're all subscription-based. And you'll get this notification that your subscription is overdue and it's time for you to renew. And then you'll notice it keeps right on running. And you think you've got the winner, you've won the lottery. You have a product that is continuing to run even though you're no longer paying for it. Surprise, it is running. but it is no longer checking for new patterns. It's only protecting you against what was out there when you were still paying for the subscription. So if you do choose to use a subscription-based service, you need to continue paying for it so that it gets the latest patterns and is protecting you against today's viruses, not just last month's viruses or last year's viruses. You've all seen pop-ups like this, a critical error. It tells you to contact Microsoft support and gives you a phone number. I guarantee you that's not Microsoft support. When you call that number, they will tell you, my God, you got a serious problem. Give us access to your computer and we'll fix it for you, only $300 or something else. But in any event, it's a problem. And often they'll come back and say, don't shut down your computer. Don't shut down your computer. 99% of the time, this is phony. If you shut down your computer and restart it, 99% of the time, this will go away. 1% of the time, it comes back. Now you have a problem. And you're going to need to go to your support people, whoever you pay to do this, to fix your computer. They may have to rebuild the darn thing. But in most cases, when they tell you, don't dare shut your computer down, they're lying to you. Shut your computer down and start it up again. And never, ever call the number or click on the link they're presenting. It will not go to the place that you think it is going. What are a few other red flags to be concerned about? Here are a few. You get an unsolicited offer to check your computer. Wow, it's free. They'll check your computer for viruses. Never accept such an offer. Once you give someone the ability to check your computer, you're giving them the ability to install bad things on your computer. At the very least, they will find problems on your computer and they will charge you $300 to fix it, and they won't fix it, and hopefully they won't install bad stuff there. But the bottom line is never accept an unsolicited offer to check your computer. You get a note saying that there's a terrible thing running around, and you can find it on your computer by looking for a file for this name. Just search for it. And you'll search for that file, and sure enough, it's there. And they'll tell you instruction, remove it immediately. Well, that file generally is on all computers. It probably is controlling something like your printing. And when you delete it, all of a sudden your printing won't work. So when you get a message, again, out of the blue, to search your computer for a file and then take some action, that's a red flag. Don't fall for it. What about, there's free software you can run that will check your computer or do something good. Be very careful about accepting software unless you know where it's coming from, you trust it, and be very careful. That's a red flag. Anyone who tries to ask you to remote control your PC, be very wary. I teach for a university. When I call their help facility and they want to control my PC, I'm fine with that because I know them and I know that's legitimate. But anyone else who asks me to control my PC, I'm not going to give them control. I don't know what they're really going to do. And of course, in emails or web pages, you're going to have click here or phone numbers, and any of those links can be problematical. You want to look at that link, you want to hover over it and see where it's really going. When you hover over it and you see, wait a minute, that's not a Microsoft connection, that's the xyz.com. You got a problem. So don't click on a link without hovering over it first and seeing where it's really going to take you. You follow these 5 steps and you're 100% better than most people. Firewalls and routers. When you acquire a firewall, when you have a router, it typically comes with a firewall. Your computers usually have firewalls. But what does a firewall do? Well, a firewall kind of blocks you. Your computer, your device is constantly saying to the outside world, I'm here, here's my ID, I'm here, you can find me. Well, that is also telling someone who's got bad stuff out there that maybe they'll try to send something to you. Remember I said that worms look for you? well, they can see you. So firewalls put a buffer between you and the outside world, blocking that, and help you avoid some of the problems of worms finding you. When you do buy a router, it's generally going to come with a built-in password. Change the password. Make sure that you're not using the password. When I bought my Linksys device, the password was Linksys. That doesn't take a brain to figure out. There are different alternatives you can use that you think may give you more security, and they do. Going over this would take another lecture, so we're not going to go over it in great detail, but I'll tell you that the articles that I have written over the last few years do discuss each of these things, whether the value of private mode, whether Firefox or Chrome is more secure. Bottom line is, Firefox is actually a more secure facility than Chrome browser, but only if you set it up correctly. If you use the defaults and don't set it up correctly, it doesn't give you any additional help. So read my article, which tells you how to do that. There are different search engines: Google, which most of us use, DuckDuckGo, which actually is more secure. Again, read my articles for more information. Where is a VPN helpful? Now, a VPN, a virtual private network, takes your data, and before it leaves your computer, is already encrypted. And as it goes, and then it goes somewhere elsewhere and proceeds on. If you're working from home, a VPN isn't all that much helpful. But if you're using your computer at the airport, you're using your computer at a hotel room, you're not using a VPN, your data, including your passwords, are leaving your computer in unencrypted fashion, and someone who's listening can grab them. So be very careful. Folks are listening. And there's a whole network called the Tor network, which does provide better security. And again, if you want to read more about it, check my articles. Safe computing. Physically, secure your computer. Again, if it's your home computer and no one else uses it, including family, don't worry about these things. But if anyone else can use your computer, be careful. Don't just close the screen, but log out of sites when you're done. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, when you connect to a website, it establishes, they call, that establishes a connection. And because each time you send a transaction there, it's brand new. So how does it know it's really you? Because it sets something up when you first log in. If you close your screen, it doesn't know you've gone away. It still is ready to support you. And if someone else gets on your screen and connects to that website, they may resume your session. And that may not be good, especially on a public computer. If you're just in your Schwab account and you really want the next person who logs in to go directly into your Schwab account. So log out of sites, especially sites that are sensitive financial sites. Don't just close the screen. Again, on your home computer, not to worry, but you're using a computer elsewhere, worry. Step away from the computer, lock the screen. That's pretty easy. Otherwise, someone else could sit down on your computer and resume whatever you're doing. Obviously, don't share your passwords. That is never a good idea. There's no good reason for sharing your passwords. Don't do it. And as far as a USB stick, you get a USB stick, you find one, and you say, hey, this is cool. I got a free USB stick. Or someone gives it to you. You don't know what viruses may be coming on that USB stick. As you may recall, Israel caused tremendous damage to Iran's centrifuges a few years back. How did they do that? They left a USB stick where a Iranian scientist could find it. He put it into his computer, and the virus, the Stuxnet virus that they installed there, got into the Iranian centrifuges, spun them out of control, and caused great damage. This is real. Be careful when you put a USB stick into your computer who gives it to you that you really trust them. There may be viruses on there or things that cause you problems. As I mentioned, for the third time now, backup locally and in the cloud. What about phishing? Phishing is where some organization is trying to get your information. And how can they get your information? They can trick you, they can scare you. You get a call from that tells you one thing, and before you know it, you've just given away some information. You want to be careful. When anyone asks you for information, especially things like your social security number, even your phone number, your address, why are they giving you this? Why do they need this information? Be very careful. Now, if you're lost on a desert island trying to be saved by the Coast Guard, you may want to give them a little information, but barring that, be careful. So, what kind of messages might you get? We've all seen this. You won $5 million in the Spanish National Lottery, and you never even knew that you entered the Spanish National Lottery. This is the gas company. If we don't receive $150 immediately, and in fact, you got to do it with a cash card, your gas is going to be shut off. Your bank seems to contact you. They have a thief there, and they want you to help them catch the thief. They'll give you a $200 gift card if you help them. Your account's been hacked. Log here for additional information. And when you log in, they're going to ask you to enter your ID and password. And who have you just given your ID and password to? It wasn't Wells Fargo. You get a message that a relative has been arrested in Turkey and needs $2,000 immediately, or they'll be get out of jail. All these things are used. All these things work. You may feel you'll never fall for it, but step back and think each time. And finally, you get a message saying it's FedEx. They're holding a package for you. This seems pretty reasonable. Please provide the following information so we can deliver it. It may be FedEx, maybe not. But if FedEx reaches out to you, even if it looks like a FedEx screen, I'd close the screen and go back to FedEx.com. Don't trust that the screen you got is really from FedEx. It may be simply trying to get your personal information. What are the big trends right now in phishing? Well, one is in LinkedIn, using it for in prospective employment, where a job offers will be put out there. But of course, it looks interesting, a good high pay. But of course, you need to put some information in so they can vet you. Well, again, be careful who you're giving this information to. You may just be capturing information from you. There's a term called smishing, which is called, it's really SMS phishing, because that's the SMS is the way you communicate on your text on your cell phone. It's called smishing. And the thing is that we tend to be a lot more careful on our computer than on our smartphone. And you get a link on your smartphone and you click on it without thinking. Don't do it. And ransomware. Ransomware is primarily delivered through email nowadays. Be careful. So how do you avoid phishing? Don't click on a link or call the number that's displayed ever. If something is displayed on a number or a email address on a link on an email that you have received, not that you have reached out for, but you have received, never trust it. Always close it, go back to the company directly, and then get your connections. So contact the company directly. If someone calls you and asks for information, make sure that you know who it is and that it's valid before you start giving information. We all want to be polite, but we got to protect our information. And if you are phished, there are things you should be doing. don't just ignore it and say, well, probably not a big deal. It could be a big deal, and before it becomes a bigger deal, take some action. So what action can you take? Well, you change your passwords, especially from wherever you've been phished. You may want to call the organization and get their instructions. You may need to close your account and reopen it. You're going to want to certainly monitor all your bills for bogus charges. And you might want to request a credit freeze from the 3 credit agencies so that no one can open new credit under your name. Now, that can get in your way when you want to open new credit, but it may be worth the aggravation if you think you have been hacked and you think your data is out there. Bottom line is, take some steps, don't ignore it. These are the 3 credit companies: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You probably didn't know that Experian is headquartered in Dublin, Ireland, but what you'll want to do is make sure that you reach out to them and have them freeze your credit if necessary. And a request from one to freeze your credit, they cooperate and they will send the request to all 3, but I would reach out to all 3 anyway. I can't beat this up. I can't say this enough. To have complex passwords, meaning complicated ones with upper and lower case and other characters and numbers, things you cannot remember. Do not strive to create passwords that you can remember. People used to do Mary Had a Little Lamb and use the first letter of the poem. Believe me, all of those tricks are well known. And again, don't use the same passwords on different accounts, especially critical accounts. What about password managers? Now, many of you already have them. That's great. What does the password manager do for you? Well, it can generate complex passwords. Just spit them out. As you, when you go onto a site, it recognizes you have told the wallet about that particular site, and it can automatically log you in. As you go to a new site, it can recognize, I don't have that one in my wallet yet. Do you want me to store it? And as you create a new password there, it'll store it for you. And it's remembered all these things for you. Many of them will also look at your various passwords and send you warnings saying, you've used that password 5 times before. You may want to think about changing it. Some of them will allow you to have your system run on multiple devices, so your laptop as well as your computer, as well as your smartphone. And virtually all of them come with free versions, which you can upgrade and have a paid option. I've used a free version of one of these for many years. I'll talk about that in a moment. These are, according to PC Magazine, the top 11 picks for this year. And they're all good. I use LastPass. Actually, in the very latest update, the 2023 version, LastPass wasn't included, but I'll continue to use it because it works well for me. So if you haven't used a password wallet, what might it look like? Well, this is the way my LastPass works. For example, when I go into it, it shows me I have 7 different credit card accounts registered with it, 7 emails, 15 financial accounts, and so on. And if I go into, say, my emails, these are my 7 emails. The one I mainly live on is Broad Online, my UCLA account. And if I click on that, I'll see a card which gives me information about the login. Now, I'm not going to show you my password, but that's as simple as it is. And you click on it and it logs you in. Very simple, very intuitive, easy to use. I use the notes on the bottom to give me additional information. So for example, you have many of your accounts have additional questions they might ask you. What's your favorite ice cream and so on? Well, I record those in the notes section. So because I'll never remember them because I don't use real things. When it asks me what my favorite activity is, I say hiking. I do not like hiking. I put stuff in there that doesn't make any sense. If I put in there stuff that does make sense, where I was born, my mother's maiden name, believe me, all that stuff is out there. It's easy to find. You're a genealogist, you know you can find someone's mother's maiden name without trouble. Being proactive may mean reaching out to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion and getting your credit report so you can review it. Now, all three credit reports, they vary a little bit, but they're 99%, 95% the same. And legally, they're each required to give you one copy of your credit report a year. When the pandemic hit, they all opened it up and gave you as many credit reports as you like. Now they're going back to the once a year. Well, what I do is I give myself a reminder, and 3 times a year, I go out there and I get my free report from Equifax, 4 months later from Experian, 4 months later from TransUnion. So around the year, I am watching my credit and seeing if anything looks weird. If you are more concerned, you may want to pay a service so you can have it monitored more tightly. But I think for me, 3 times a year is plenty. Now, when you go out there for your free credit report, don't go to www.freecreditreport.com, because www.freecreditreport.com is a commercial site, and it will actually ask you for your credit card. And after 15 or 30 days, we'll start charging you. You want to go to www.annualcreditreport.com. That is the site where they offer you the legally mandated free credit reports. www.annualcreditreport.com, not freecreditreport.com. A little advertisement for my series of articles. I'm up to 85 now. The most recent one was published 2 days ago. And this one stepped a little bit away from the warnings about all the bad things on the internet, and is sharing some tips that I've used over the years to get the most out of my heritage, ancestry, and other main search websites. So there's a few tips that you might find helpful. I am a genealogist by, at least I claim to be, as well as an IT person. So hopefully these articles you may find helpful. If you haven't been following them, you may want to. I publish a new article every month, and they're all freely available at this particular website. When you go to it, all 85 articles are still there, and you can read any one of them. They're 1 page long, and you'll find them helpful. The most previous one before that was how you can easily stop text and voice spam on your iPhone or Android device. The one before that, the bad situation I had where my wallet was stolen and my iPhone was stolen from my locker at the gym. Luckily, I had been doing things which made it less painful than it could have been, and so I decided to share some things you might want to do if your wallet or purse is stolen, what you might do about it. Cyber warfare, how to get to free databases that you think are only, you have to get free databases through your public library. I'm signed up with several different libraries because they have different databases and they're very helpful. Anyway, I urge you, if you're not already a follower of my monthly articles, become one. And to bring this to close, what am I trying to leave you with? 1, use varied, complex passwords and a password manager. Probably that's the number 1 thing you should be doing. Your password will be hacked. Understand that will happen. You don't want them to have that password and be able to use it elsewhere. Don't just close your windows, but actually log off, especially if you're on a public computer. Monitor your statements and your credit reports on a regular basis. Look for anomalies and take action. Don't just ignore it. Have antivirus on your computers and have security updates come automatically. Typically, your devices come with that they have antivirus and they have security updates, and you have to turn it off. Don't do that. As far as antivirus, I guess one last thing I would mention is typically when you buy a computer, you're going to get one of the commercial products installed on there 90 days for free, and then it will done you to renew it. Go ahead if you wish to, but you may be better off, as I did, is I turned it off and went with the free service that comes with Microsoft, and it works just fine. Back up your data twice, locally and remotely. Be careful the websites you visit and in opening suspicious emails, and especially clicking on things on these websites or on these emails. And whenever you get an urgent offer, something that is going to expire immediately, you must take action right now. Take Nancy Reagan's advice and just say no. Believe me, the folks who do these things are very good at it. They're very good at grabbing you emotionally and getting information from you before you can think. When your nephew is being held hostage, when your cousin wants you to buy a card for her at the local Target store because she can't get into her financial system right now, but she'll get it right back to you. Now, these things are triggers. Be very careful, and listen to Nancy Reagan, just say no. Don't let folks rush you into making a bad decision and giving away your personal information. And that is what I wanted to share with you. With that, I'm going to release my sharing and ask Avrami to share some of the questions that may have been posted in the Q&A.
Hal, thank you. That was very interesting and timely and important, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. I'll go through some of the questions, and then you can, elaborate or see if they're relevant for the group at large. Okay, can you recommend remote backup services? The top 2 remote backup services?
No, I'd rather not. What I'd suggest you do, there's a magazine called PC Magazine. It's online. I generally trust them. You got to be always careful because they're always going to defer to their advertisers. But I would go to PC Magazine. They at PCMag.com. They are constantly rating everything, including online backup services, and they'll give you the top 10 and give you a little information on which ones you might want to use. But I've not heard of any that aren't particularly good. I would start with PCMag.com and go with their recommendations.
Many sites have links to, from a genealogy perspective, many sites have links to records, to archives in other countries. How can they know to trust those links?
How can you trust a website? It's a tough one. People can create websites very easily nowadays. I guess you might even want to post a message on JewishGen asking for other people's experiences with that website. There are, there's nothing like getting recommendations from friends, but just be careful. In general, when you go to a website for information, I do it myself, and I've generally been okay. But the things to be careful about is if it ever asks you personal information, if it ever asks you to click on a link and you can't, and you're not exactly sure why. When you click on a link, you're allowing it to do something, and that doing something could be installing bad, malware on your computer. In most cases, it's not a problem, but I would just use your sixth sense. If something doesn't feel right, close it.
Is the Google Password Manager a secure option?
Yeah, Google Password Manager works well. Microsoft has a good password manager. There's a whole bunch out there, and any one of them is far better than than not doing it at all. I kind of shy away from Google things only because Google is in the business of collecting your information. That's where they make their money. And everything you do on Google, whether it's Gmail or Google, they're recording that information. And when they tell you they're not selling your information, that's true. They don't sell your information. They rent it. They don't sell it, but they will, companies will pay them to use that information to reach out to you. And so, although the Google facilities are just fine, and I use Google stuff all the time, Google Maps, I use all of it. I'm always sensitive to the fact that everything you do on Google is being recorded and they're making money off of you. Remember, if the product is free, you are the product.
Right. One more question is, what are your thoughts on putting your family trees online, Genie or publicly accessible places?
I addressed that in one of my articles years ago, actually. There's nothing, although one could create you could think about it and say, well, maybe I'm giving information away there, my mother's maiden name. Believe me, that information is already out there, and no one cares about your great-grandmother's maiden name. I have not heard, and I've listened hard for this, any serious problems where individuals have been exposed and hacked because of having family trees out there. The bigger problem, frankly, is that some relatives are really opposed to having your family tree out on the internet and might shut down and not provide you information if you put stuff out there. But as far as putting yourself at risk for phishing and all the other things, I have never heard of a serious situation about this. And the value of sharing your family trees so you can grow them is tremendous. So I would do it.
Okay, thank you. That wraps up for today. Our next session will be next Wednesday, also at 2 o'clock. Our speaker will be Mark Halpern, and his topic will be understanding your Galiziana family through vital records. So also a very important and interesting topic. If that's where the family comes from, I encourage all of you to join. Hal, thank you again for joining us. This was a very important and informative presentation. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. Wishing everybody a wonderful rest of the day and hope to see you next week. Take care.